So again, thank you everyone for joining Reframing Open Enrollment as a Total Reward Strategy. I'm Alex Lewis. I'm the Director of Business Operations with Prospect HR Consulting. My role sits at an intersection between operations and people, which is part of why this topic is one that I care about a lot. I'm going to be moderating the session today. Joining me for technical support and chat support is Lindsay Ryan, who is the Partnerships Manager with Justworks. She'll be popping in from time to time. We also have our experts for the session. We have Kate Bruce, who is a senior HR consultant with Prospect HR. Kate has over 17 years of experience in HR leadership and consulting. She's an expert at solving complex organizational challenges and building better workplaces from the inside out. Within Prospect HR, Kate is our compensation benchmarking and total rewards expert. We also have Mike Flynn, who is the manager of benefit sales specialist with Justworks. Mike has over 8.5 years of experience as a benefits leader and currently oversees a team of licensed benefits consultants with Justworks that are dedicated to helping small businesses navigate complex benefits decisions with clarity and confidence. Welcome and thank you, Kate and Mike. With that, let's go ahead and get started. So every year around the same time, there's a collective sigh from HR departments, right? It's time for open enrollment. It's time to go through that administrative checklist to make sure our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. But the truth is that when we treat open enrollment as an administrative deadline or checklist, it is common and often that our employees can see it as a very similar sort of burden, if you will. So we're going to kind of shift perspectives here. We're going to stop checking boxes and focus on building culture for the purpose of this conversation. But we're going to just take a step back. Mike, do you want to just get us started a little bit with some foundational considerations for open enrollment and health insurance strategy?
Yeah, I'd love to. Good to see everybody. I'm Mike Flynn, as you know. Yeah, want to help to kind of set the base here. You know, in talking with a lot of our clients, they do feel like insurance pricing is a bit of a black box. Certainly doesn't have to be. There are plenty of inputs that actually do go into your insurance pricing. You may or may not have experience with these, and it does depend on the type of insurance you have too. So the things to think about when we're understanding where your initial rates come from, when you're shopping for health insurance, how do they actually calculate those rates? It's a variety of factors. Typically, what I would tell somebody is it's based on their industry, right? It can be based on their location as well, where your company's headquarters is, or where you have a group of, maybe your main group of employees. Of course, the group size, depending on how, the size of your company, you may be eligible for different types of benefits. Um, your age, your demographics, right? All those things that you might be filling out on an insurance census go into the rates, and of course your plans that you select. If you select very, very rich benefits, very low deductibles, right? Strong, large networks, right? Your rates are going to be a little bit higher, and if you do the reverse, then they might be a little bit lower, right? So all of those things go into your initial rate. Um, you will never get perfect clarity, of course, when you're getting a quote as to exactly where the numbers are pulled from, but those types of things do influence your initial rates up front. And then, of course, we have the renewal moment, right? So every year renewals, it's health insurance. Of course, we know that it typically does go up. Um, why do rates change at renewal? Can be for a variety of reasons. Claims experience, of course. How have you used your plans? How do they expect you to use your plans in the future? And how might the insurance company have to price your renewal to offset any uh, increase to your claims or to cover the claims that you've already had? Market trends, of course, those things are a bit out of our control as employers and as consumers of health insurance generally. Any sort of carrier adjustments, if the plans might change, right? Maybe they expand the network or they offer a different variety of plans, your rates might change. And then, of course, changes to your actual group, right? So the number of employees that you might have or how they might be using the insurance, right? If you've grown from 20 to 70 employees over the course of the year, your renewal picture might look a little bit different than if you grew from 20 to 25, right? So all of those things can uh, give you a little bit of a baseline as to, how your pricing actually works, and it will differ scenario to scenario. But um, Alex, if we want to go to the next slide, I think the things that, we talked about on that last page, a lot of them are out of our control. Or realistically, we need to grow the business, right? We need to hire these people. These are not things that, are always taken into consideration when we are selecting benefits, but what is within your control, right? So contribution strategy, of course, how do you contribute to your employees? A lot of companies will decide, hey, we want to contribute 100% employer paid, right, to the insurance, and the employees will get a free plan. Depending on your company, that may or may not be the right call, right? So when you put a little bit more of of the financial piece on the employee, they might be a bit more deliberate in selecting their plans, adding dependents, what have you. Of course, your budget also plays a key kind of piece there. We want to offer a high level of benefits and a credible benefits package to our employees. But we need to keep the company in mind as well. It's not just a finance decision. It's how are we building our benefits philosophy. And of course, employee engagement, right? So how do we educate the employees about the plans? How do we make sure that they might be selecting the right plan? What resources might they have? Um, all those types of things are things that you can control and pieces that will help you keep your benefits budget within reason and give your employees a fairly good experience. Alex, we can go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about two different types of insurance, large group and small group. They may not be applicable to your company, right? Both options, but the thing that I talk about is there generally are two different types of group health insurance that companies are offering. Small group, which is for small businesses, typically under 50 employees in some states like New York and California, under 100 employees. You will get small group health insurance. It is not going to be based on maybe how you use the plans, but more so based on where your company is located and the age of the employees. You have large group health insurance as well, which is typically reserved for companies that have 50 or more or 100 or more, depending on the state. Or those are the types of benefits that you can get through a PEO. So if you are a small business, if you're a business of 7 employees looking to offer insurance for the first time, right? Or truly, if you're even a business of 120 employees and you're looking to change your insurance, a PEO can get you access to large group health insurance that you might not otherwise have access to, whether the plans are exclusive or you're just not eligible, right? So as your company approaches certain size thresholds, you may jump back and forth from small group to large group, right? But some pieces that we want to keep in mind: how are we growing? What does our benefit spend look like now, right? This kind of optionality, if you do have the ability to do so, or you have the ability to maybe join a PEO, is certainly a quite an underutilized decision-making kind of tool that a growing company can use. And then, of course, I talked about the renewal moment, right? So there's a couple of different, questions here, right? Are we still on the right type of renewal health insurance plans themselves, right? Like, is the plan design still serving the workforce that we have now, or have we changed, right? Have we doubled headcount and all of a sudden we're a totally different company than we were yesterday, right? Are we leaving tax savings or employer benefits on the table, right? So there are employer benefits to offering these plans as well. Whether it is a tax advantage or just culturally something that we want to highlight to our employees. And I think that those are questions that we want to um, ask ourselves. And then, of course, work. I've been at Justworks for almost 9 years now, and having worked for Justworks, I really do think that we do this a little bit differently, right? So think about the way that I like to think about it is this: we try as best as we can to show the most transparent pricing out there, right? Insurance can feel like a black box. I started off by saying that, right? Um, but we shop around, work with different carriers, we work with different types of insurance, really just to try to find your company the best rates, right? And we're always going to show you how. we kind of gathered those rates and maybe show you what's best, right? Not just what the rates are, but how they actually are built. There are tax savings passed back. Justworks is one of few PEOs that will pass tax savings back to your company. It's a Section 125 tax savings. Essentially, what we're doing is we are not taxing you on the employer contributions to health insurance, right? Many PEOs do that, and then they'll actually keep the savings. What we're doing is you're taxed on those, right? Traditionally, you're going to be taxed on those, but JustWorks is just going to um, pass that savings right back to you. So you're taxed and then you're supposed to get it back. We're just going to give that to you right up front, right? So depending on the size of your company, right? A company with 98, a company with 43 employees, you're going to have fairly huge tax savings there. We give you access to multiple plan types. I talked about that earlier, right? Small group, large group, as many options as we can. And then, of course, some proactive guidance. So every year at renewals, we're not necessarily going to just hop in there and say, here's your renewal. Good luck. Go make some choices, right? There's a conversation to be had. We will automatically shop the available options for you. We're not going to make you do the heavy lifting to try to find the best insurance prices or carrier out there. The idea is that we want you to keep the bones of JustWorks, but if there might be a better option on the table, we don't want to leave that unturned. So let's recap, right? Benefits pricing is not necessarily a black box, right? You can understand what is driving your numbers. You have a lot of control, right? You can control the plans that you offer. You can control contributions. You can get the employees engaged and knowledgeable about the plans, and it might help not only your budget, but it might help to keep the employees happy as well. If you are able to evaluate both small and large group health insurances, absolutely take advantage of this. This is not something that most PEOs do. This is not something that a lot of brokers do, right? You want to leave as many options out there in front of you so you can really choose the best piece. And just to wrap, this piece up here, right? A strong partner is the key. So you get an expert. You want to partner with somebody who is knowledgeable, who has the experience, who's maybe worked with the type of business you have, maybe has worked in a whether a similar industry or just companies in the same situation. And you're going to want somebody who's going to be shopping for you and making it easy for you year over year. So you're not surprised by your renewal and you're not, um, you know, kind of bogged down by the increase in rates and where do we go from here. You'll have plenty of other options. And then I think with that, I think it's a good time for us to hear from Kate, who has a little bit more to build upon on in terms of what your employees might see here.
Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to call out to Alex. There was a question in the chat earlier from Yana about what is best practice. I don't know what it was referring to because it was a while back and maybe it was already answered. So
It was a question about the split of employer contributions. What are typical best practices there? Thank you.
I'll answer that in the chat, Yana, and everybody else should be able to see that too.
Thank
right. Okay, so benefits are an extremely valuable and important element of an employee's total rewards, and it's usually one of the most costly components, second only to cash compensation. However, the annual exercise of going through open enrollment is also an opportunity for employers to evaluate their benefits programs, just as Mike explained. So not just the plans they're offering, but the contribution rates, how much cost sharing, design, et cetera. And it's also an opportunity to sort of evaluate your overall employee value proposition and how benefits fit into that. So when we think about an employee value proposition, what we're talking about is the unique set of benefits and rewards that an employee receives in return for their skills and their capabilities, their work and experience, and everything that they bring to that organization. It really helps organizations define what they stand for, why people are attracted to work there, and of course, why they would stay. I'm going to spend a few minutes going through some of the elements listed on this slide. So probably the most obvious component of the value proposition is compensation. A prospective candidate will likely not even consider a job unless they believe that the pay being offered is fair, that it's competitive, and it's commensurate with the scope and the responsibilities of the job that is they're being considered for. When thinking about compensation, employers should consider not just how much they should pay for each role, but how employees should be evaluated and rewarded for their contributions, both relative to the organization and relative to each other. Generally speaking, when employees understand what they're being evaluated on and how they can progress in the organization, they're generally more satisfied, which we'll talk about when we get to the career pillar. We spent a bunch of time already talking about benefits, which is the second pillar shown here. We focused more on health and welfare, but it's important to think about the overall benefits, which could include things like paid time off, retirement savings, flexibility, such as being able to work flexible hours, working at night versus working in the day, mental health care support, things like an EAP or commuter benefits for those organizations where employees are required to be in person. There's a lot that companies can offer to employees outside of core health and welfare insured benefits that are benefits to employees, and some of them could be very valuable depending on the population. So I touched on pillar 3 earlier, but employers should really think about employee satisfaction with their career progression when they're thinking about their employee value proposition. So asking questions like, do employees understand how they can continue to grow and progress in their career? Are they provided with appropriate training and development opportunities? Do employees understand what it takes to be promoted? Some employers provide, additional college stipends or incentives or pay for other development outside of the work environment, in addition to training inside of the organization. The fourth pillar here, which is really the fourth and fifth sort of go together, is that companies should really consider the work environment and company culture when they're thinking about their overall EVP. So, for example, is the work environment here supportive or is it competitive? One is not necessarily better than the other. It's just recognizing what you have, mm-hmm. and that drives your attraction and retention strategy as well. Does the work move at a fast pace or is it slower? Are employees expected to be available outside of working hours, and therefore maybe we give some extra comp time or something like that? How do employees communicate with each other, and how does leadership communicate with employees? All of these things contribute to a company's culture and work-life balance. Do employees understand the company's goals and strategy? Do they feel connected to or motivated by the company's mission? All of these things can be either, attraction items or retention items in some ways. It's also really important for organizations to think about expectations for managers, particularly, for organizations of the size we're dealing with today, 40 to 100 employees. Those organizations are going to have a couple of levels of managers. How are those managers being trained? What are the expectations of them? How does that contribute to the company's work environment and culture? Although it's quite difficult to put all of these elements, so everything you see on the slide, these elements of a company's employee value proposition into words, it's hard to just summarize it in one neat sentence, or to quantify all of the aspects of an employee value proposition. It is possible to communicate the intention of an employer's value proposition through meaningful and thoughtful communication. Open enrollment is a great opportunity and a time to consider, what is our employee value proposition? How do we want to communicate this to people from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective? So in terms of what do I mean by quantitative? In terms of a quantitative perspective, thanks, Alex. We're going to the next slide now. This could be something like a total rewards statement. Total reward statements are typically individual employee communications showing how much a company pays overall in order to employ that person. Oftentimes, statements will include base salary, bonus, if that's something that your organization pays, the cost of health and welfare benefits, could include employer FICA and Medicare taxes, the monetary value of paid time off, the monetary value of perquisite benefits. These are all things that sometimes organizations include on such statements. And oftentimes, employees don't understand the total cost of their employment. They only really think about their base salary. They don't realize, well, oh, actually, it takes a lot. It costs a lot more than that for me to do the job I'm doing. And so total reward statements can be a great way for employers to increase transparency about, about what they're offering and show the full value of total reward. I will say it's really important to think about, timing of any such total rewards communications in terms of, does this go along with something else? Is this part of an open enrollment communication? Am I going to be equipped to answer questions about this statement if an employee has questions? So it shouldn't just be like, oh yeah, let's create all these for our employees. You have to think about the sort of holistic communication around it and how that could really reinforce a company's employer value and overall employee value proposition.
I think that's absolutely great. Thank you so much, Kate and Mike, for sharing some like foundational insights with us so we can kind of steer our conversation now to be a little bit more targeted and dig a little bit deeper and ask some questions. As a reminder, we will be monitoring the chat. Thank you so much for those who've already put some questions and for Mike for providing such insightful responses to some of the questions here so far. So let's talk about compliance for a second. What are some of the common compliance or administrative risks that employers might overlook when managing benefits on their own? Mike, do you want to start us off with that?
Yeah. I think like number one, the way to put yourself at risk is to not partner with the right person, right? Or group of people. If you're not partnering with the right advisors, you might get bad guidance, inadequate guidance, right? So that's number one, right? Partner with someone who's got the experience. Maybe it's somebody that's been referred to you, or maybe it's somebody that you've seen, oh, they've been in the industry for a while, or they have a great reputation, in XYZ area. Of course, you want to watch out for like suspiciously cheap plans, right? So anything that you're seeing, if you've got five health insurance quotes in front of you and one of them is tremendously less expensive than another, you're going to want to make sure that that plan is a legitimate ACA compliant medical plan that has the minimum essential coverage, right?
Yeah.
Why is my plan $200 versus a competitor that's charging $500, right? Is there a coverage gap or something like that? So I think especially as you grow, these things become more and more important. You're going to want to have the right partners for something like that.
That is exactly right, and something definitely to keep in mind. Sometimes less is not always better. Kate, do you have anything else to add here?
I would just add that, just to keep when you're evaluating providers, Mike was talking about how it's important to have a good partner, is just making sure that you understand responsibilities in terms of administration, like what are we responsible for, what is my partner versus the insurer. Sometimes, things that I've seen fall through the crack a little bit are COBRA. If an administrator may or may not be responsible for that, sometimes former employees have to reimburse the employer for the cost of the coverage because the payment still needs to come from the former employer. So it's just important to think through some of those administrative items and make sure you know who's doing what.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Kate. Mike, I'm going to go back to you real quick. So for a small business that wants to offer, competitive benefits, when they don't necessarily have like the size or resources of a larger company, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but Can you just dig a little bit deeper into like how a PEO specifically helps with this type of strategy?
Yeah. I always say when I have a lot of conversations with small businesses, like a lot of conversations. I always say there's a path to offering benefits for almost any company, right? So you're going to want to partner with a PEO that can, of course, maybe get you a policy with their PEO's master policy.
Mhm.
So that's a large group quote that these small companies typically would not have access to, right? You have to be over a certain employee threshold.
Yeah.
Ideally, you're partnering with a PEO. Justworks does this where they're also shopping small group health insurance. You would typically access small group health insurance through a broker. My team, we are the brokers at Justworks, right? So we do all of the small group kind of conversations and strategy there as well.
Okay.
So you're going to want to have those options. There also are options for like reimbursements, right? If you want to do an ICRA, right, which is the individual coverage health reimbursement arrangement, so everybody enrolls in their own individual plan and then gets reimbursed. It's a tax advantaged reimbursement, right? So uh,
Mhm.
partner with a PEO that vets all of these available options to make sure that you're not leaving any path kind of unexplored. Ultimately, what will work for your company now may not work in
Mhm.
5 years, but let's set a good base and find the right partners so that we can continue to grow it.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mike. And Kate, I'm just going to ask you to we're going to shift focus a little bit. We're going to stick with the concepts of like having a limited budget here, but what can companies do to ensure that their benefits are an asset in attracting and retaining talent?
I think the most important thing they can do is communicate them clearly because oftentimes people don't understand their benefits and how they fit into the overall picture of
Mhm.
employment. So if we're talking about attraction, it's important that benefits play a role in in that recruitment process. Maybe
Mm.
not necessarily in a posting, of course. Obviously it's just usually one line in the posting, but sometime in that interview process, it's a good thing to go over. It could be a real tool. And also in terms of retention, sometimes people don't really understand their benefits even after they sign up. So what does this mean for me and my family? So having a benefits webinar, brokers will do that for you. And really, driving clear communications would be the most important item.
That's great information, and thank you, Kate. I'm going to stick with you for a minute, actually. And how can an organization make sure that its benefit strategy can grow with them as they add employees, add locations, add complexity? How can you make sure the messaging is consistent?
Sure. So I think obviously Mike talked about this earlier. If your demographics have changed considerably, that's a good time to check in and say, do we still have the right plans? Does this make sense for us?
Mhm.
So if you're growing a lot or shrinking a lot, then that's an automatic indication of, well, we need to evaluate, is this still appropriate?
Yeah.
So, if we're adding locations, do our providers even have good coverage in these new locations? Thinking through all aspects, not just numbers, but because especially in the US, states can be quite different, and networks in those states. It's also, I highly recommend doing an annual engagement survey. It's an opportunity for employees to provide feedback, and for employers to evaluate how valuable their offerings are and find out what's working, what's appreciated, what feels valuable to them, and what's
Mm.
not, because you might be spending money on something that really isn't valuable to them. And so that's a way to save money and put that money somewhere else. So I think that's a really good idea. In addition, I recommend that anytime that you're changing your business strategy or your organizational strategy, you think about your benefit strategy as well.
Mm.
Because if you're shifting your business strategy, get ahead of it and think about, well, how does my benefits strategy going to need to follow this or mirror this in some ways? If we're going to be growing, then we need to think through how that will impact. If we're going to be outsourcing or divesting, we need to think about how that's going to impact, et
Mhm.
cetera. The last item I'd say is it's important to also think through the support model. to what's being offered. So, for example, like if you have a health plan and your company started in New Jersey, and that health plan is great in New Jersey and the broker provides lots of service, but then you grow in a different state and there's
Mhm.
no one there to answer questions about those plans, that's not going to be a good employee experience. So just making sure that the support model mirrors whatever the strategy changes.
Well, thank you, Kate, for all of that. And I think you provided a really comprehensive description there. Mike, do you have anything to add to that, or do you have any recommendations for how employers can make the benefits experience easier for not only their leadership, but also for their employees?
Yeah. I mean, just plus one, the biggest plus one I could give to all the points that Kate gave. Kate, I've stolen a lot of those for my future conversations. But yeah, my one piece of advice there on the benefit side is don't start too fast, right? When you're first starting out, it's a lot easier to have the conversation of, hey team, we're going to be increasing our level of benefits or our the quality of our insurance or something like that. It's very difficult to have a conversation about, hey, we've got to scale back. It's
Mm,
not to say that those things won't happen, right? But it's always good to temper your budget a little bit and you want to build a base that you can grow upon because what happens in year one or year five of offering benefits is not going to be what happens in or what works in year seven or 10 or something like
mhm,
that. And then in terms of making things easier for an employer, right, or the employees, like it's not just about the insurance plans. I think it's about the whole experience. Employees love easy to use platforms. If you can get
mhm,
them some sort of decision support, accessible resources, right? And I talk about the word, I use the word credibility a lot when I have conversations like this, but you do want credible uh, you want credible folks being able to help your employees, whether that is your PEO or your broker or another,
mhm,
service, right? Um, and you want to make sure that you can lean on those folks for any questions that might normally come to leadership. So like as leaders, I'm sure we often get the question, "Hey, I take this medicine or my husband goes to this doctor or my kids need this, like what plan is best for me?" And you might want to create a resource for them that kind of keeps those questions separate from you. You can help move them through the process without having to get too personal. They might be more willing to kind of open up and help make a decision from there. So as long as they're kind of feeling comfortable. And Yana, I see your question in the chat. I will definitely quickly answer that in the chat, and then we can get more into it in a sec.
Amazing. Just for the rest of the audience here, so the question in the chat is, when evaluating both small and large groups, taking advantage of this underutilized strategy, can we kind of elaborate on this? So for those who have just joined us, Mike had spoken about how you can, with the PEO, evaluate both small and large group benefit options. And Mike, I would default to you just to actually give a little bit additional context for those who just joined this conversation since we have the opportunity.
Yeah, sure. So small group health insurance is typically what you'll get through a broker. It's for small businesses, and it is typically for companies under the size of 50 full-time employees, sometimes 100 if you're in New York or California. Um, Small group health insurance is almost always based on the age of the enrollee as well as where your company is located. So a company in California with a 35-year-old employee will have a different rate than a company in Delaware with a 50-year-old employee, right?
Mhm,
But what they don't do is they don't assess any sort of risk about these specific individuals. On the
mhm,
large group side of things, you're 50 or more, or maybe 100 or more, depending on your state, or if you're with a PEO, they will actually take the health insurance census you have. They will try to assess some sort of risk about you. There are those factors that we talked about, towards the beginning of the call, right? But things like your industry, your location, how large your company is, any sort of age or demographics for your company. Uh, all those types of things will go into the evaluation of the risk, and you will be issued a rate from there, right? So two very different ways of uncovering health insurance rates for your companies that could provide vastly different options to the employees and to the company. So I think it's good to shop both where you can. If you are eligible for both, I think it's a great idea to find a partner that can get you both types of quotes.
Thank you, Mike, for reiterating that. I think that's incredibly valuable here. shifting back to, I guess, employee and leadership experience a little bit. Kate, I want to talk to you a little bit about the like open enrollment experience and, dig a little bit deeper because you mentioned earlier this is an opportunity for employers to really demonstrate to an employee what that, value proposition is and how a total reward statement is really an opportunity to kind of do that and put some quantitative data down so you can see exactly what is being offered. Um, what would you say to an organization that is sort of contemplating implementing a total reward statement or like this sort of process, um, in preparation for like this upcoming like open enrollment period?
Sure. I think the first step for any organization thinking about that is to just take stock of what you provide to employees because oftentimes it's sort of in different places. And so, especially at smaller organizations, like some things might be administered by HR, maybe by finance, it could be in pieces. So sort of just taking stock, taking a step back, thinking, what are all the things that we do for our employees? And then thinking through, well, which ones of these could we actually quantify in a
Mhm.
reasonable way? It's, if you say, oh, we buy our employees lunch once a month, it's like, well, I don't know how much that's going to show up on a statement. It's certainly a nice thing to have, and it's a one. I'm sure it adds to the employee experience and the company culture, but it might not be something that you would put on a statement. So to really think through what those things would be, and then thinking through, would this be meaningful to employees? Like, do employees already have a good understanding, or would this really take things to a new level and provide them useful insight? Um, I think it's really important to think about how this statement would either enhance or reinforce company messages or strategy. You know, if if it's a year where you're down and you're not providing bonuses and you did last year, and people will say, well, what were my numbers last year, and see things going down, that's probably not a good year to introduce a statement. Whereas if you feel like you have a good story, that this is a really valuable thing, this could be a good time to introduce one. So I recommend considering what else is going on in the organization in terms of like, is this the right time for this? And I would also think about the practicalities of actually communicating. So, like, what happens if an employee has a question about their statement? Can their manager handle that? Or is that going to come to HR or finance or an HRIS, another support, like an outsourced support? So just thinking through like what is this practical for us?
Mhm. I really like the storytelling, component piece of Kate that you sort of mentioned. And it's also important, I would presume, to make sure there is consistency across like all platforms in which you're sort of telling the story of the organization as well, right? You mentioned maybe the uh, monthly lunches might not be a part of your total reward statement, but that is something that could really demonstrate a culture. It would be great to sort of have, pictures from recent, lunches with the team on social media or on your website, and it kind of reinforces what it could look like to work for your organization.
Yes. So again, qualitative versus quantitative.
Yeah,
So you could do a lot more qualitatively
yeah.
sometimes than quantitatively. Yeah.
Um, Amazing. Well, so one final sort of question for both of you, and then we will kind of go into the chat and see if there's any additional questions for the team here or the group here. But what is one change that a small business could make in the next 90 days to attract and retain their employees? We've been speaking about a couple of things here, but Kate, if you can just sort of pinpoint like one specific thing that we could maybe do in the next, couple of months.
I think integrating benefits from an attraction standpoint, integrating benefits into the interview process is sort of
Mm.
like an easy thing to do.
Mhm.
The next thing is, which is less easy, but if you're not doing one, is an employee engagement survey. It's not that hard though. I mean, you could do one in SurveyMonkey. It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be. There are some really wonderful platforms out there, and
Yeah,
they're great, make it super easy for you, but you could also do it more
yeah,
DIY. It doesn't have to be that big thing, but an engagement survey to give you feedback
yeah.
about not just your benefits, but that would certainly be a large part of it.
And I think one just general like caveat with an engagement survey, Kate, and I'm sure you would sort of reinforce this, but um, being prepared to implement any changes that kind of come from an engagement survey.
Or address why you're not implementing them.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly it's a good call out, Alex. It's really important to think about what is going to be the communication follow-up. Like, we heard you, this is what we're changing, this is what we can't change, this is why.
Yes.
So being really prepared to do that.
Yes. Amazing. Mike, do you have anything else to add from your perspective? Like, what is one change that a small business can make in the next 90 days?
Yeah. I think highlighting the value of the benefits that you offer and the partnerships that you have
Mm.
related to those benefits is something that not enough companies do. So, for example, maybe you do a lunch and learn to highlight the importance of using your ancillary benefits in the right way,
Mm.
or as open enrollment begins, right? You set up a company meeting or some office hours to talk a little bit more about the medical or the other types of benefit plans that you offer, and
Yeah.
give the highlights to everybody. There are some people that make their decisions during those times simply out of kind of a need to just get it over with, right? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people will let those roll over, and if it's working for them, that's great. But there are
Mm-hmm.
going to be people that want that level of engagement and are going to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like we just had a partner of ours come in and talk about creating like a living will and all those types of things, right? And we had a handful of folks take 30 minutes out of their day during lunch or whatever to go speak to that expert and listen to what they had to say. Those types of things I think are really important. And then, just if you're not offering benefits, one thing you could do within the next 90 days is start exploring. You don't have to commit to anything. Nobody's going to make you sign a contract, or, once you start exploring or get a quote, you have to offer those. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but get your toe, start to put your feet in the water and see what
Yeah.
comes back, right? Like, I think that there are benefits available to companies of all size and at all stages. It just depends on maybe if you have the right partner or if it's the right time.
Mm-hmm. I really like the lunch and learn concept there, Mike, and thank you for that because it really sort of supports this sort of like continuous education around these sort of like ancillary options, and how a employer can support an employee from like a very broad perspective. So I appreciate that insight. Um, today's conversation was really intended to sort of like start to shift perspective. We barely scratched the surface on how we could sort of reframe what an open enrollment process can look like, and what that can ultimately mean for your workplace culture. Culture is determined by a million and one daily actions that might seem minor or minute in concept, but can make a really significant impact on your organization. It just starts with one decision, one intentional improvement. I think really today, Kate and Mike started sharing some of that framework for you all. But what you do with that is going to make all of the difference. Before we go into the audience and see if there's any other questions, I want to ask the audience to just sort of comment in the chat. Like, what is one step that you think you could take after today's conversation to be more intentional with your open enrollment process? Please go ahead and comment now. We would love to hear, what your takeaway was from today. We do have just under 10 minutes left here as well. And so I want to sort of shift gears a little bit and see if, Lindsay, if you have any other questions that you heard from the audience, that we could ask Kate and Mike to sort
Yeah,
of round up today's conversation.
absolutely. I don't see anything further in the chat right now, but Mike, I wanted to. Oh, look, Scotty, love that you're already with Justworks. That's so great.
Perfect.
Great to hear. Kind of related to that, Mike, you mentioned something earlier as folks are evaluating options. Maybe they are going to see some quotes from a few different providers, whether it be exploring a PE over the first time or maybe evaluating other options. It's always good to see what else is out there. You mentioned being wary of prices of quotes that are significantly lower than what they're seeing from other providers. Can you talk a little bit about how that might affect them in the long term? If it's tempting to go with those quotes in the short term, right? Because you see savings there. But can you talk about what that might mean in the long run of things?
Yeah. Well, so oftentimes when I'm speaking with like say a 10-person company, they might come back and I might have a health insurance quote that has them at this rate, right? And I'll talk them through all those items. But they might come back and say, "Hey, well, I got this quote through Health Insurance USA or something like that, and it's half the price of what you have, right? How do we make up the difference?" And a lot of the times those plans do not cover, they are not ACA compliant plans, which does not mean that they won't cover you if you get sick or there's an injury, an emergency, whatever, right? But what it does mean is that the plan is not compliant with the ACA. So if your company grows to say over 50 employees, suddenly you might find yourself in a position where you've got to scramble to find ACA compliant health insurance, which means a total change to your budget, right? And a total change to what the companies are used to, what the employees are used to. Also, if I'm talking with a small business that is planning to take or hire talent from some of their top kind of competitors, maybe some larger companies that offer maybe a more enterprise level of benefits, if you're offering an insurance plan that does not cover things like, potentially your like annual visits, right? Or maybe even you have a limit to the number of times you could go see your PCP before it's fully out of your pocket. Those types of things are going to be noticeable in their experience. And reputationally, that could damage you with your current employees as well. So it can be tempting, right? But there are other ways to save money on the health insurance side. Not every company is ready to spend a couple $100 a month or more. Um, but you can offer an ICRA, for example, right? That you can reimburse without really any minimum budget, reimburse some sort of contribution to your employees to their individual plans, right? So I worry about as we grow, but I also worry about reputationally, what benefits are we offering? And are we setting our employees up for success? We want them to be healthy, not only because they are our employees and we need them to do a great job, but we care about them as people, right? And you'd never want to get a call from someone that is like, "Hey, I just went to the primary care for the fifth time this year, and they told me that I have to pay $400, for a simple e-rake or something."
Mm. Well, that would be a very harsh reality now, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Um, well, I mean, with that, we are actually almost at time. If there's no other questions from the audience, I think we'll just go ahead and sort of wrap things up here. Um, you know, First and foremost, I want to say a huge thank you to Kate and Mike for sharing your expertise with us today. I think you've brought so much to the conversation. And again, we've just barely scratched the surface of how we can sort of shift perspective here. But I hope it was incredibly valuable. I certainly think it was. Um, and I hope that everyone feels like there is something they can kind of take away and hopefully implement in the next 90 days here. I also want to thank Lindsay, Ryan with Justworks for providing some chat support and technical support as well. The session is recorded, and I will make sure that everyone has a copy of their full recording within the next 48 hours. If you have any follow-up questions today, I'll be sure to share our contact information as well. So we are here as a resource to you all. With that, I want to thank everyone for taking some time out of their day today. And yeah, well, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Great
All
day.
right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.